Howdy, this is Mr. Justice, and we're going to talk about topic 2.6, adaptations. So take a look at these little guys here. These are called mossy frogs. And what mossy frogs are, they kind of look like little masses of moss, right? And they definitely blend in, right? Looking at the picture on the left-hand side, this mossy frog here doesn't really stand out, right? Mixing in with the moss around him. Think about the advantage that that trait gives this mossy frog, right? It is able to hide from predators, and as a result, will be able to live, survive, reproduce, and pass on its mossy frog traits to its offspring. So, what is the source of Earth's biodiversity? The answer is evolution. Evolution can be defined as the changes to the genetic makeup of a population over time. If the the frequencies of the genes of a population, the gene pool, if it changes, that population is said to be evolving. So let's talk a little bit about the mechanisms where that could happen. Right, take a look here. You remember this from biology in ninth grade probably. The genotype, our DNA, the sequence of DNA in our genome, determines the phenotype, the physical features, the traits of individuals, right? Some genotypes will give rise to a phenotype that gives an organism an advantage. Think of that maybe greener color to that mossy frog on the previous slide. Right? The question you might be interested in asking yourself then are, why are genes different in the same species, right? Why aren't all humans identical, for example? Think about this. You look different than everybody in your family. The reason why is because of genetic mutations, right? These genetic mutations, these small mistakes in our long stretch of DNA in our genome give us, impart different traits to us, right? And if those traits give us an advantage, meaning that it allows us to live, thrive, reproduce, right, so that we can pass on our genes to our offspring, then we've got an advantage. There's some other ways, though, that we can recombine the genetic material here in our world, right? This is genetic recombination. You probably remember this from biology too, through the process of meiosis. If you remember prophase 1, right? Prophase 1 is when the crossing over event occurs, and some of the DNA, the genetic material from homologous chromosomes, will exchange with one another, right? Such that we have, in the end, these gametes here, these reproductive cells, each one slightly different than the last, right? There's another piece of the puzzle here too. In addition to genetic recombination, there's independent assortment that also happens too. Remember that from ninth grade biology, I'm hoping. What that is essentially is there's these chromatids here in our four gametes, our reproductive cells. These different chromatids here will sort themselves independent of one another. So that means then that this kind of whiter, lighter colored short chromatid, it could have ended up in this cell just as easily as it could have ended up in the cell below it, right? Switch it. That's called independent assortment. So mutations, genetic recombination, and independent assortment account for all of that wonderful genetic variability that we have all over the world in all of the different species all over the world. Like these guys here, these are the Anole Lizards. Anole Lizards live in southern United States and on islands in the Caribbean. And you're looking at here, they're little small guys you kind of have to imagine that are able to grasp and hold on to branches, for example, right? And so think about maybe why it would be an advantage to have larger pads on your toes if you're an anole versus smaller pads if you're an anole, right? Hey, well, this area over here, it has quite a bit of hurricanes, right? And if you're an anole that doesn't want to die and be blown away by a hurricane, you'd want to hold on to a branch potentially, right? And so I'm telling you this here because there was a really interesting experiment that I'd like you guys to go to and watch using the link on your screen. All right, I'm not going to play it here for our lecture, but I want you to push pause. You can open up another tab and you can watch it by going to the link on this screen. And if you watch it, what you'll see here is that that process happened exactly for the anoles that lived in a small Caribbean island. There was a group of researchers out measuring some of the phenotypes of the anoles there, and tragedy hit. Disruption, natural disruption, swept through the island, a hurricane, and wiped out a good section of it. So it was kind of interesting though. So they weren't really testing out the effect that hurricane as a selective pressure could have on the anoles. They were doing some other research, but the hurricane created an opportunity for them. So they went back to the Caribbean island that had been impacted by that natural disruption by that hurricane, and they measured the different anoles that they're really the survivors there to see if there was any difference in their toe pad sizes. And it turns out that there were a couple differences. The males were a little bit smaller after the hurricane, but their toe pad sizes were just a little bit larger too. In addition, they had shorter femurs, so allowing them to grasp and hold on. These longer legs here kind of act as sails, and they can, if they in a strong enough wind, can whip these little anoles off of that branch pretty readily. So traits like larger toe pad size or smaller femur size, these are traits that improve fitness for this species, right? And by fitness, we're talking about that ability to thrive, live, survive, and reproduce, passing those genes, those favorable genes, to offspring, right? These traits, these favorable traits here are called adaptations. Competition can also drive them too, right? Competition for limiting resources is a selective pressure as well. All right, so yeah, think about this right here as you watch this video. How have selective pressures caused anoles to adapt? Use details and examples from the video. I'll push pause so you can watch this one, and we're back. All right, so take a look here. There are different adaptations for organisms that live within the desert too. You're looking at a barrel cactus, right? Hey, remember that adaptations improve a species' ability to survive and reproduce. So think to yourself, how do the adaptations of the desert organisms make them uniquely suited for their environment, right? Think about it, precipitation levels are pretty low, so water is pretty scarce in a desert. So in an effort to conserve water, barrel cacti have waxy outer tissue or layer on their outside of the plant that really helps to retain that water so that it doesn't evaporate away. And because there is this like source of liquid water, other animals might want to get at it. And so an adaptation that has evolved over a long period of time for barrel cactuses or cacti are these spines, right? These spines do not allow certain organisms to be able to get in there and dry it out. Take a look here. There's another adaptation on this little guy here. These very large ears not only help with the hunting process too, but on really warm days, this guy might be able to be cooled down by the blood moving through that very thin tissue and kind of acting as an air conditioner in a way, right? And then recirculating the blood through its heart pumping throughout that cooler blood throughout its entire body. Or likewise on a cooler or colder day, right? Deserts can be pretty cold too. This guy can hang out in the sun with its large ears, and that kind of reverse process could happen, right? The larger surface area on the ears will get warmer up, warming up that blood, which can then be pumped through the body too. Pretty interesting stuff. So here on day 18, what I'm going to have you guys do is make sure that we turned in that AP Classroom vid answers, the video that we did last session. And then I've got a day 18 article. It's going to be about some Anole lizards. You're going to read a little bit more about some of the research going on with anoles in our part of the world. And then also I've got that hurricane study. I've got the actual real data of their toe pad sizes that I'd like you guys to get into and take a look, all right? And we'll pick it back up when I see you again.